Hey there folks, this is Father Dougal 9000 here, and welcome to the second episode of Dougal's Game Finish Chronicles, a series where I talk about the games I've played and beaten as part of the Hardcore Gaming 101 Forum's Game Finish Challenge. Like the previous video, and for most of these going forward, I'll be chatting about 2 or 3 games I've played depending on how much I have to say. Unlike the last video, the audio quality is different. I was originally gonna just use the mic off my tablet, but a few folks I showed the video to complained about a loud whine that might be more an issue with the mic than anything that I can actually solve. So I decided to just go with the Blue Yeti Snowball mic I had lying around anyway. I guess this series won't be entirely 2008 energy, but hey, you know, better than having an awful whine. Which isn't my voice. So, let's get started with this new fandangled audio setup, and the next 3 games, which I originally logged on the 18th to the 20th of January 2021. Tanglewood for the SEGA Mega Drive. This is one of those games that I privately refer to as new retro, where it's a brand new game, but made for a retro console. You can play this on the PC, the Mac, and even the Linux, but this was designed for a Mega Drive first, so that's how I chose to play this. I've always admired that whole concept of developing something new for an old system, but this is my first time playing such a game for a system that I actually have some reverence for, and yeah, it was really cool. Tanglewood's a puzzle platformer where you play as a fox wandering through the woods, with a very naturalistic bent in its presentation. So there's no on-screen display, and the sound is either in-game noises from animals and the surrounding environment, or it's brief musical cues that punctuate important moments in between the silence. The game is generally quite good at conveying things that this never becomes a problem when trying to solve puzzles, though this becomes less so as the difficulty increases and trial and error starts to become irritatingly common. Not helping this is that while you're allowed to look up and down, the levels are designed in such a way that you sometimes never know if it's safe to jump a gap, and you have to resort to an old leap of faith. Ugh. But that said, I was always compelled to keep playing. There's plenty of puzzles offered with the mechanics that interact with each other and result in some fairly clever combinations based on what you already know. The environments regularly change, and each of the chapter's acts offer a new spin on ideas, so it never gets tedious. There's even a couple of moments that legitimately took me by surprise and made me want to see what happened next. In a weird way, it felt like the game that I always pictured whenever people talked about the cinematic platformer Another World, but without the instantly harsh difficulty that put me off Another World. It's hard to articulate how exactly, but that's how it felt to me, and I'm very glad to have played this. If you'd like to give it a shot, you can get it from the developer's itch.io page, where you can get both a version to play natively on your computer of choice and a .bin file for the Mega Drive version. Just be sure to read the included manual PDF. It gives you advice on enemies and certain mechanics in case the game doesn't clearly convey what you gotta do or what you can do. Oddworld Stranger's Wrath for the Nintendo Switch. Oddworld is a series that I remember being quite a big deal back in the late 90s, early 2000s, for its unique art direction and for mixing comedy quite well with more serious themes such as consumerism and slave labor. But the only one that I ever played much of was this first-person shooter with platforming back on the original Xbox. I was very bad at it, since I was an idiot at the age of 9 when it came to video games, and I hadn't been able to play it since because our old Xbox crapped out and the game was never made backwards compatible with the Xbox 360, so I thought I'd finally revisit it on the Switch and see how it fared. I quite like the vibe of Stranger's Wrath, where it's very blatantly a Western, but it's got enough of the Oddworld trappings where it feels very much like its own thing. In particular, I really dig how the stranger's slow, stilted delivery isn't just a nod to the likes of The Man with No Name, but it also carries this suggestion that the stranger isn't very good at talking, either to other people or talking in general. The settings are clearly inspired by westerns, and similar enough to the grounded look of the Oddworld games that the two work wonderfully together, resulting in plenty of gorgeous locales that I frequently stopped to take a couple of pictures with the Switch's old screenshotting function. The fact that small critters make up your various kinds of ammo and weapons adds a cool diegetic touch to your arsenal where you can just pick them up and fire them at lads. And I really appreciate how you can either kill everyone or capture them for money. It lends a lot of versatility and in-the-moment thinking during the more hectic firefights, and there are plenty of those because believe me, this is a pretty tough game, even on the easiest difficulty. Definitely don't go into this one half-cocked and guns a-blazing or you'll be dead in seconds. But hey, you can save wherever you like, so that's always cool, that should help you out in a pinch. Perhaps my only criticism is how repetitive it gets after a while. To be fair, Stranger's Wrath does a lot to make each bounty feel unique with their own specific areas full of geometry, gimmicks, and ideas that are barely reused elsewhere. And because you often have the ability to choose from multiple bounties, it means you can replay the game with bounties in a different order every time. I suppose I just wish there were more optional bits that maybe played around with some puzzles or had some cool esoteric ideas. At least more optional things than the one hidden black market in one of the towns. But then that's more a case of the game not being what I want it to be, rather than being bad for what it is. And hey, it's definitely a game that nevertheless I'd still recommend checking out if you're into more unusual first-person shooters. Stacking for the Xbox 360. This was one of a handful of digital games released by Double Fine in the early 2010s. It was born from the Amnesia Fortnight, a period of time where the developers split into 4 smaller teams and created game prototypes during the uncertainty of whether Brutal Legend was ever going to be published. This game, designed by Lee Petty, is an adventure game where everyone is a Matshiroka doll and you, as the smallest doll, can take control of progressively bigger characters to solve a variety of puzzles. And variety is very much a deliberate description, because each puzzle has multiple ways of being solved, requiring different characters and approaches to solve them. As such, the game is very open-ended, and you're even encouraged to replay older puzzles with new characters just to see what happens. I very much like how this is one of those games where seeing it in action gets across its ideas and overall vibe much better than I could ever talk about it, especially in its presentation. The setting's something of a cross between Victorian English society with brimmings of the Great Depression, with themes such as child labor and extreme income inequality driving the events, while having a fairly successful mix of comedy thrown in. Actually quite a bit like the Oddworld games now that I think about it, albeit more lighthearted. There's a particular focus on lifting elements from silent cinema of the 1920s. Characters only ever talk in text boxes or brief speech bubbles. Cutscenes are staged and shot as if they're filmed on a stage with props and curtains. And the soundtrack by Peter McConnell is inspired by the style of music performed or added to silent films. All of this combines to make an adventure game that's entirely its own thing, both aesthetically and mechanically, and one I'd happily recommend to adventure game fans and, hey, people who just love works with a strong 1920s feel about them. It's available on computers and is backwards compatible with the post-360 Xbox consoles, so it should be quite easy to get. Heck, you can even grab it off Double Fine's itch.io page, yes, they have one of those, and it even throws in the Lost Hobo King DLC expansion for free, so why not? Have at it, hell yeah. And with that, we've finished the second episode of the series. I hope that the new audio checks out okay, I hope that you enjoyed watching, and that you'll tune in for the next video. Again, thank you so much for watching, and until we meet again, have a wonderful day.